Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so you can build it yourself.
This episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast is brought to you by our sales coaching and consulting services. Are you looking to create repeatable, scalable, and predictable revenue? We've helped thousands of companies grow their business with tailored expert advice backed by testing to ensure they establish the best practices that will work for them. Head over to bit.ly/predictable coaching to learn more.
Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Stewart. Today I'm joined by Mia Murphy, co-founder and CRO over at Tontine, and we're going to talk about her sales and co-founding journey. We've got a real interesting episode here. So Mia, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Collin.
So I know you started life as an SDR. We're not going to go, obviously you were a baby and a toddler and blah, 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 blah. But we're going to go back as far as a stint as an SDR, an SDR manager, and you had this client. Talk to me about this client and, kind of the results and then your journey to where you are today.
Yeah. So I'm at Tontine now. A few years ago when I was a baby SDR, they were using an outsourced for sales and also prospecting. So that is kind of how we connected. But they were spending a lot of money trying to outsource everything because it was a great product, and they just didn't have the funding or the bandwidth to really manage a whole team, to build out a team. It's an investor. And so a lot of people that's where startups go to when they're trying to figure out things in the early stages. And so fast forward to building out a whole BDR team at another startup. They were outsourcing before as well. And I had to come in and completely build out the process, hire new people, and kind of do what I'm doing now, which is recover the lost profit and basically gain the investors' trust to be able to turn around the company in a very short period of time.
And I want to go back. I want to sit on the didn't have the bandwidth comment for a minute. I hear this so many times. We run a sales outsourcing. We don't outsource the closing, but we outsource the prospecting, which I think is a little bit different. We can talk about the nuances of why I would be for one and against the other. And again, it's always a time and the place. But when it comes to don't have the bandwidth, I hear this all the time and it drives me crazy because I have conversations with founders and I can tell they're like, this is the bottom of my to-do list. I don't really care about this. And the salesperson, is sitting there thinking, geez, your poor sales team, you don't give an F about them. And you're not even thinking about this and the process and about how you figure this out. Your path, your company's product's path to market is the single most important thing. And it feels like you're ticking a box of what janitorial tissues do we buy?
Mm-hmm.
It feels like the bottom. And so I hate we don't have the bandwidth. Don't have the bandwidth for, closing my first customer's argument. Tell me about, help me understand your side.
Yeah, I can't stand that either. And sales, that's your revenue. That's how you're going to stay afloat. You have to be on the ground and in the weeds yourself before you can hire anyone on to even outsource or not, to even be able to train them and teach them about your product market fit, who you're talking to or anything. So not having the bandwidth and it's like passing off your company to people who are half working on it and really not super experienced most of the time, or because outsourced companies, depending on who you're using, are entry to mid-level and working on several projects at a time. So it's just kind of passing off your idea and the most important part of your company to someone else just because you really don't want to deal with it, or you feel like you may be above it, I would say.
Yeah. And I hear that a lot, and I wonder if that's just like a hat that they put on just to so they don't have to say that I'm afraid, or I'm afraid of figuring out this sales thing. It seems like a scary part of the business, and
Yeah.
the void of not making any, not being able to prospect, having to make cold calls, having to get on customer calls and get no's. Like it's not an easy thing, especially if you don't come from sales. Like I come from sales and still I stare off into the void, into the abyss of like the forecast. And I'm like, am I going to fucking hit this thing this month, or are we going to, are we going to eat it? And, there's more ups than downs, but like I've been doing this a long time and it's still terrifying at times.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is a part of it. And it just depends on the founder and their background. So, if they have a few companies they're running and they're kind of more in the funding investors, they don't want to do that. They don't want to do that. They've done it before a couple of times. And so they just want to sit in the background. They'll have a great product idea, develop the product, and then just kind of pass on someone else and hope it works because they have the money. Or again, someone who's develops the product, loves their product, but doesn't have that sales background. And that's where the scary void comes in. But you've got to take that leap. If you believe in your product, you have to sell it.
So I was having a conversation with Lars Nilsson this morning. He's the VP of Global Sales Development at Snowflake. And he described it as sales development and kind of building a revenue function as placing a cash register on top of your idea. And I love the analogy because it's something that if you're not kind of, it's another side of the business. It's another side of, your company that you need to build, right? You can't just have this one, great idea and then expect it to sell itself.
Right. And, I come from all my family's in sales, and it took me longer than my parents to get into that just because of different personalities. But, I've seen so many startups, the CEO and the founders, they develop the product. That's their baby. And so it kind of feels wrong to them. Like they're going out and talking about the product, but they're not managing the sales team because they're so focused on spreading the word, or it just feels wrong to them almost, like because it's not their background.
Yeah.
So,
and I think my argument to anybody who's like sitting there, because I totally agree. And I remember the transition being strange, but a really good customer call discovery process is effectively a customer development. On the product management side, if you've done product management, if you've done a customer development meeting where you're asking a customer about, or a prospect or whoever, about their pains, their challenges, how they do this, how they do that. I mean, that's discovery. And then there's no like, I don't know, the way I close, I'm like, hey, this is what I recommend. What do you think about that? And they're like, oh yeah, it sounds like a good idea. I'm like, cool. They give me their credit card number. Happens just like that every time.
yeah.
No variation.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously exaggerating, but those are kind of the high notes. It's, you're doing customer discovery, you make a recommendation, they go, yeah, okay. Or I have some questions. And then,
Right.
Answer their questions.
Right. And your salespeople that you hire need to be able to do the same thing. And you also need to be able to confidently say no when it's not a good fit, when it might not be for them, and have that integrity of your company and have those qualifiers and let that trickle down to your sales team.
Totally. And that's one of those things that if you outsource some of your closing is really hard for somebody who's not inside the company to appreciate. And I think there's a time and a place for outsourcing. And I'd love to, I mean, you're somebody who has worked in an outsourced relationship, outsourced relationship and an outsourced, you know what I mean? I'm not good at words right now. But worked for an outsourced company where somebody's outsourcing their sales development.
Right.
The thing that I think about with outsourcing your sales development team is, it's a function that books meetings, and it is eventually a function you're going to want to bring internally. With the AE role, I just really struggle to, especially the first AE role. That's a really risky hire, I think, to outsource. I'd love to hear your side here.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with the time and the place for outsourcing SDR roles and then bring internally, and then my opinion on outsourcing sales, which is becoming more and more popular for the AE role. So I think, they're booking meetings. The company you're outsourcing to book those meetings and prospect. I treat that as more of a gathering your consumer data and market fit. So I would say when you're outsourcing meetings, not to expect an ROI in clients, like obviously that's the goal. But when you're doing that, because they don't have that internal like passion for that product and or the incentives, it's more of a data you're collecting for when you go internal and who you target. And so that, and then once you develop, you kind of see the trends in that data, who to call and who to hire, and your process to build out for that, and bring it internal, then you can have more measurements and expectations around revenue and incentives for them. So you can really base them on things that will contribute to the company and profit wise.
Totally.
And when it comes to outsourcing AEs, I have a few friends who do that, and they do outsource sales to closing. They'll come in to close. But, even I've had 3 turnovers of AEs in just the last year because of them not believing in the product, and they weren't even outsourced. So the money's there, but the client can tell when you're not fully knowledgeable on the product and you're not there to genuinely help solve their problems, if that makes sense.
I hear you. Yeah. And I want to come back to the profitability of outsourced sales development in a minute, but let's stay here. Honestly, outsource, insource, one of the greatest success factors of any salesperson is going to be your ability to understand and empathize with the customer. And I think there are people that do that, whether you're insourced or outsourced. It's harder to do in an outsourced fashion, right? That's one thing where you could look at all the factors of what goes into this or that. And I think that's probably the most critical. And it's just harder to do and when you're an outsource, because you haven't been trained and onboarded, and you don't live in the culture of, Tontine. If I'm an outsourced SDR, you are, a lot of times people treat outsourced and contract, et cetera, as kind of outside the bubble and not included in all the things. And so it's hard to gain the understanding of the product and where everybody's at without being included in all that.
Yeah. And even when they want to be included in that, outsourced companies, even internal, they focus on the wrong metrics, dial counts, meetings booked, meetings held. So even if me as an SDR, I was very loud, very driven. I wanted all the responsibilities all the time, and I wanted to book quality meetings and understand everything about who I'm talking to be able to relate to them. But, I wasn't hitting 100 plus dials a day, which is usually expected. I would sometimes, take the amount of time needed to do some research on who I'm calling, read my data, and do the trends. And they, so a lot of time, even when the clients are wanting to be engaged and understand their outsourced team, the outsourced team is focusing on wrong metrics and KPIs instead of results.
100%. I think any SDR team program, you got to look at the inputs first, especially in the first 90 days of a relationship. The client is going to want to see, hey, is this team, do they say they could do this many dials? Are they actually executing this many dials? Is it turning into the early stages? But I think you're totally right. As it goes on, obviously we don't want dials. We want meetings. We want pipeline. We want close won revenue, right? We, as somebody who's been in outsourcing for 12 years now, I understand that it's a very direct line from you give me some money, I do something for you. And if that thing I do for you turns into revenue, I get a customer for a very long time. If it doesn't turn into revenue, I don't get a customer for a very long time, right? But there's those like early signals, and I think on both sides we both get too focused on, like, both as on the outsourcer and on the client side can get very overly focused, especially in the first kind of 6 months, on like, what are these metrics? What I find is like the first 90 days, everything's under a microscope. You deliver a few meetings that are like, on the targets, you hit your numbers, the pressure, everybody takes a step back, everybody takes a breath. They're like, oh, these people actually can deliver. Months 3 to 6, you get your first couple of meetings that are later stage pipeline, your first close one deal. If you can do that in under 6 months, the client's like, okay, here's my credit card. I'm not going to pay attention to this anymore. And like, just keep billing me, just keep sending me all the stuff. And like, the trust is won. You get a long-term customer.
Right. And the trust can be won too, just by them having the expectation that dial count equals effort. They're in the right effort, like being like they're calling in the right way, they're prospecting the right way. And so that's what they use to track, like, is this person actually working on my project and putting in the work I'm paying them to do? So the person who is managing that relationship, that client relationship between the internal team and the outsourced team, needs to have a more sophisticated approach, and understand why, if those meetings they booked went into closing stages, why did that happen? Make sure the SDR understands too, like why they went into those stages. What were the qualifiers? What were the trends to follow? Because I, as an SDR, I'd make 20, 30 dials, but I was focused on connection rates. So if I make 20 dials, 10 connections, 7 meetings booked, it doesn't look like I did a lot that day, but that's what's going to contribute to the growth of the company, which a lot of people don't really see or correlate.
Yeah. And I think it's I'm looking for the book behind me and I can't remember off the top of my head. I feel like it might have been The Sales Manager's Guide to Greatness. Anyway, he talks about how metrics are basically irrelevant. Like, the only thing that really matters is the earliest indication is the pipeline that you're managing, and like the closed one revenue. Like, everything before that can be misleading. And it's a very complex, well thought out argument, and I'm doing a very bad job of regurgitating, because it's been about 1 year or 2 years since I've read the book. But in the early days, the only thing that matters is the calls, because you want to show that your SDR manager that, hey, I know how to call, I know how to follow instructions. But once you're booking meetings, like, if I've got an SDR and they're on quota, I don't care. I don't give a shit how many calls you make. You're hitting your meetings booked, you're hitting your pipeline, like, things are progressing. Don't care. With an AE, if you're on target for the month, for the quarter, for the year, I don't care what you're doing. You could be closing calls while you're skydiving, and I'm like, fine, as long as you're on or above quota.
Yeah. And, at my next company, the next startup that I was a manager and had to build out the team at, it didn't go well towards the end because someone was brought in and I refused to enforce dial count. I wouldn't look at it. My team was hitting way over like any industry standard. They were booking almost 30 meetings held a month that were qualified, and they were making 14 calls a day to the right people. Like, I didn't care, and so I wouldn't enforce those KPIs. I was like, if they're having a high meeting held rate, they're going into advanced stages in the pipeline, they're aligned with their AE, they're closing revenue. I don't care how many calls you make. And there's also a thing that people will qualify meetings and they try to enforce BANT for cold calls.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And
tell me more.
Long story short, I died on that hill. I gave a little bit, I wouldn't do it. And so
let's talk about why. I have some very strong feelings here, but I want to let you go first, because I could rant for 35 minutes about this. I
can rant for days.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. Man, I even know some AEs who won't take a call if you don't have that band. And that's what was happening at another company I was working at too. And so, when you cold call someone, first of all, they don't know you. You are trying to convince them and see what pain points they have, not really be a salesperson, but kind of get to know their challenges. And so they're not gonna, they might have a budget, they might not, but they're not gonna disclose that information to you. Also, you can find that online. We have those resources, and that's where sales call and the need there. This is what frustrates me the most. They are not going to be able to correlate their challenges and your solutions together. Like the need, they won't know really until they get on the sales call. It's only a very short call typically when you're prospecting and booking a meeting. So budget, authority, need, timing, they don't know you, they don't know your product. They might have a need for it, but they aren't gonna basically, give you their credit card over a cold call.
No, of course not. And anybody who does,
information like that.
you got to be wondering, well, yeah, there's a limited amount of trust, right? Like we all know,
Right.
and this is a classic Aaron Ross analogy, but we all know squirrels love pizza, right? Commonly accepted fact, it's their favorite food. But if you were to throw a pizza at a squirrel, it would take off and you'd never see it again. But if you were to be holding a pizza and you take off a little piece and you put it down in front of you and you back away, soon enough, the squirrel's going to be eating out of your hand. And that's kind of the analogy with the sales development call is I'm just trying to see, hey, do you want to bite a crust? Do you want a tiny little crumb? Is this enough? Are you interested enough in this to bite on it? Great. Let me set you up for a larger conversation because the trust just isn't there. You still might throw a whole pizza at me. And, the people on the other end of these calls are just expecting oh, I've got you. I'm going to run through my script now. And that's what they're waiting for. That's the pizza that they're like, I kind of like pizza, but I don't want somebody to throw a script at me. And you do that, they hang up.
Oh, of course. Like you don't talk at people. You have to have a conversation. And no matter who you're calling, what level they're at in the company or organization. I talk to presidents a lot of the time and C-suites. Like that's who my SDRs are prospecting. And if you just call them and start ranting about your product and what you do, your value, it's a lot of the time like revenue based, and which bigger companies don't really care about. They have bigger challenges to solve besides that factor. And so you can rant at them, but instead of asking questions, you need to lead them to the problem that they are probably facing before you can even introduce a solution. And then you give them that ground to get on the sales call where they dive deeper into their needs. Because now you start ranting about your product, they're not going to correlate the challenges that might not even be on their mind at that moment.
Totally agree. And to bring it back to like why BANT is the wrong thing to look for on a cold call or a prospect or as an output from a sales development team is one, to your point, they're never going to open up and give you all this on a cold call. You call somebody out of the blue and you're like, is this a robocall? Is this spam? Is this somebody trying to, sell me fake Microsoft, security advice, right? Those are the kind of the things that we are competing with as sales development reps. We just got to get past that and say, hey, I've got this thing. We solved this pain, this problem. Is that interesting to you? And if it's interesting to me and they're the right person, because hopefully you called them because they're the right person. If they're willing to jump on a call, that's a great connect. Now, is that a guarantee to progress a pipeline? No, it's not. But is it a great first place to start? Is that a great conversation to have started? Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest mistakes a lot of people make in sales development, and kind of the interface between marketing and sales is if a prospect doesn't have BANT, I don't want to talk to them. What a waste of time, money, space, marketing dollars of if every rep I hear that from them, like you basically shouldn't be here.
I mean, and I want to say two things. One, the SDR, they can't give. Typically, I would not advise them to give them pricing over a cold call. That's not the place for that. And two, the budget, it goes back to the pricing thing of why something's not selling. If they have a problem that you can solve, they will make the budget for it. If it's really a problem and you can convey that, the budget's there.
If you can make somebody $1 million or $2 million, if you can save them $500,000, you certainly can find $50K in the budget.
Well, the fact they're even jumping on the call shows interest. And even if it doesn't close at that time, you're building a relationship for the future, or someone they know that they could refer you to.
100%. I mean, I think the majority of sales development conversations are going to turn into these accounts that you work over a period of time. And eventually they're going to become customers because you stayed in touch. And it's not going to be everyone, but if you think about it, like if you took a picture of your whole market right now, and if you said, okay, now this is impossible, but let's pretend you take a picture of everybody and you're like, okay, red dot for I'm ready to buy right now, blue dot for not ready to buy right now. And imagine you could visualize that. And I know this is silly, but I'm a visual person. It's going to be like 1% to 5% of your market is ready to buy something right now. So the chances of you happening on, them, and there are certainly things that you could do to increase the odds of that happening. And there are certain plays and things you can do. But I mean, let's assume, you're going to meet the standard distribution, maybe a little bit higher. 5% of people you talk to are going to be ready to buy right now. Like that's 1 in 20 calls. If you're booking, sales development meetings, that means you got 19 people that you need to stay in touch with. And when we saw this, when we hired our first SDR, it wasn't me. It took them 6 months to get their first closed deal. Not that they were closing the deal, but book a meeting that had turned into a deal. And so it took us 6 months to get the first deal. Then we saw about a deal every other month. And then around the year mark, we started to see about a deal a month. And we were looking at it. Half of them were from the kind of first pass touches, like the, first connections. And then the other half was him just working all of the people he had talked to in the past 12 months. And he had this special nurture campaign and he was just working them and get on Pete, because it was getting him a deal a month. And it effectively doubled the output of our sales development program, because he was nurturing these folks.
You have to follow up with them, and you have to follow up with them in a way that's relevant to them, not just blast them with emails. Show them you care, show them that you listened, and you asked the right questions on their timeline, and they will respond better when you don't force them, try to pressure them into a close.
Yeah, I think they respect it more when you understand and respect their time frame.
Right.
Sales development people are just trying to see if this is interesting. Salespeople are just trying to see if the time is right to solve it now. And the problem that they have is the same shape as that our product solves. It all kind of boils down to those two things.
Right.
Now, fast forward to your journey here at Tontine. You had a quarter and a half to turn things around. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I was avoiding the direct sales role for a really long time. I was in management, prospecting, didn't want to be on the ground. It was scary to me for a while, but I came in. We had 3 hires that they had the experience. They looked good on paper, and it wasn't really me who vetted them, but we were kind of just why is this not selling? Why is this not selling? Trusting them. And then eventually it came down to the point where our funding is running out, and the investors say, hey, where can you cut budget? Obviously, we have to cut the salespeople who aren't performing. That left me with me for a little bit. And one other SDR I had to really vouch for, put my faith in. And so quarter and a half to be profitable and stand on your own, and your funding will cut off. And it cut off Q1, mid-January this year. And so it's be profitable or be ready to cut budgets, which we don't really have room to do, especially on the sales side. And so when that happened, I was working 24 hours a day. I'd be up for all night, taking sales calls at 2 a.m., prospecting, doing the whole thing.
Australians too, I bet. Hey,
Australians.
yeah, I've done that. I'm like, yeah, sure, mate. I'll take a demo with you like 9 o'clock your time at Sydney. And I'm like, why am I getting up at 2:30 or 3 a.m. my time for a demo? I love Australians, but I hate selling to them from Vancouver time zone.
Yeah,
Dumbest idea I've
yeah.
ever had. Yeah.
Oh, I had to cut off my calendar eventually. We have a great marketing team, and I kept my calendar open because I was like, I will take any meeting. Like right now, I had 2 weeks in November before we did a first cut, and then another 2 weeks to do a second. So I had to make a decision to fire one person now, or like bet on myself to close a deal before two people got fired. And so, yeah, I left it open, 2 a.m. meetings, 3 a.m. meetings, all over the world. But eventually, and those meetings didn't close, but they closed this quarter, some of them. And so, that hard work was worth it to be able to turn it around. We just became profitable now. And a couple of weeks ago,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we were losing customers though, and our LTV was down because of the pressure sales from the other people, the discounting, the not genuine care or understanding of their client. It was just a signature pass off to the team. And so I had to battle that as well. The churn rate to become profitable, not just hit a target, but we lost a huge client last month, and I had to make up for that quickly and or face the same consequences, not the company
Or
going
not.
under or anything, but like, who are you going
Yeah.
to cut if this doesn't happen, and be able to forecast that, like, and be predictable on that.
Those are never fun conversations. It's always interesting to come face to face with like the formula, which is the number of customers we onboard every month multiplied by the average revenue they give us every month, or multiplied by the lifetime, the average number of months they stay. It's like, that's your theoretical monthly recurring revenue cap. And the only way to grow a company is to influence one of those levers. And salespeople not doing proper disco, not caring about the customer, not caring about them, and hitting that magic moment as quickly as possible is a great way to sell churn, as I think Mark Roberge used to or still says. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll spend a lot more time and money, the company will, dealing with that churn rate and losing your client than you did onboarding them. And you have to hire people, especially in startups, that are in it to grow the company in long term and are willing to put in the hours, learn things, understand the customers, and care more about the company and the growth and the big picture rather than how much commission on their next check.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Mia, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing. I really appreciate the candid thoughts on your journey, on the pressure that you've gone through the last couple of quarters, your journey to get here, and your thoughts on sort of outsourcing and what makes sense, what doesn't. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing. I want to give you a chance to tell us a little bit about Tontine and how you help customers.
Yeah. So if anyone is a Shopify brand, we exclusively work with D2C Shopify brands. And if anyone's struggling with, understanding their client behavior, understanding where they're missing out on profit and revenue, why their abandoned cart rates are so high, or any revenue or money that they could be leaving on the table, that's kind of where we come in. So Tontine, we do A/B price testing and content testing. And so we do real-time traffic segmentation on subscriptions, shipping thresholds, your individual product, your bundles, your kits, anything product price related that could be affecting your hitting your target and your revenue goals. That's where we come in. We take all the work off of you. We implement, we do the data analysis, the business analysis, the test launch, and then also our content testing we have now launched, which is like the conversion rate optimization. Adding to cart and is something that's often missed by people and they look at abandoned cart, but the add to cart, like there's so many things that could be affecting it on your page, like the layouts, how things are presented, and people won't even get to the cart. So that's kind of where we come in and play, help maximize your revenue, work with you and understand what to price things at, how to do layouts on your site, and when to do it on your peak season, off season, anytime.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
You can go ahead and go to tontine.ai, submit a form. If they want to get in touch with me, Mia at tontine.ai, or you can go to my LinkedIn.
Beautiful. And I will throw a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes here so that everybody can just click a button and find you there. Mia, thank you again for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thank you, Collin.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you all next week.